On September 12, 2020, in the peaceful town of Pine Haven, Oregon, a young couple named Nathan Morgan and Sophia Walker celebrated what appeared to be the happiest day of their lives. Their wedding ceremony took place at a charming vineyard estate nestled among towering evergreens, with autumn leaves beginning to show hints of gold and crimson. Close friends and family gathered to witness their vows, raising glasses of local wine to toast the newlyweds as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. To everyone watching, Nathan and Sophia seemed like they were made for each other. Their relationship had blossomed over the past 2 years, and from the outside, it appeared solid, tender, and built on mutual trust. Nathan, 34, worked as a project manager for a construction company. Those who knew him described him as dependable and level-headed, the kind of man who solved problems rather than created them. His colleagues admired his work ethic, and friends valued his loyalty, though many noted he kept his emotions carefully guarded. Sophia, 31, had built a reputation as a talented freelance photographer whose work appeared in several regional magazines. She had moved to Pine Haven 5 years earlier to escape what she vaguely described as a complicated past in Seattle. With her warm smile and creative spirit, Sophia quickly became a favorite in the local arts community. She had a gift for capturing moments of raw emotion in her photographs, something that seemed to come from a deep understanding of human vulnerability. They met at a local coffee shop where Sophia was photographing for a feature on small-town businesses. Nathan had been drawn to her immediately, watching how she moved with purpose, finding beauty in ordinary corners. He asked her out after their third accidental meeting, and their connection was immediate. They bonded over hiking trips to nearby mountains, weekend drives along the coast, and quiet evenings debating the merits of foreign films. Within 18 months, Nathan proposed during a sunrise hike, presenting a vintage sapphire ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "I've never been more certain of anything," he told her as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Sophia's eyes had filled with tears, and she whispered yes without hesitation. What Nathan didn't know, what Sophia had carefully kept hidden, was that the woman he fell in love with harbored a secret that she believed would destroy everything they had built together. Sophia was transgender, having completed her transition in her mid-20s before moving to Pine Haven. In her new life, she rarely mentioned her past, choosing instead to live authentically as herself. The memories of rejection and fear from those early years remained buried, a chapter she had closed firmly before meeting Nathan. As their relationship deepened, Sophia wrestled nightly with whether to reveal her truth. Each time she gathered her courage, panic would set in. She'd heard too many stories of violence and abandonment, seen too many relationships shattered by revelation. What if Nathan, despite his gentle nature, couldn't accept who she was? What if the man she loved looked at her differently, with disgust or betrayal in his eyes? "He loves me for who I am now," she convinced herself as their wedding day approached. The past doesn't matter anymore. By the time they exchanged vows, Sophia had buried her secret so deeply that she almost believed she could outrun it forever. For their honeymoon, Nathan surprised Sophia with a week-long stay in a secluded cabin near Crater Lake. "You've always wanted to photograph it," he said, presenting her with the reservation details. "I thought we could have the lake almost to ourselves this time of year." The cabin was everything they had hoped for, rustic yet comfortable, with panoramic windows that framed the ancient forest outside. A stone fireplace dominated the living room, and a wraparound porch offered perfect spots for morning coffee and evening stargazing. They arrived on September 14th, the air crisp with early autumn, the forest alive with rich earthy scents of pine and moss. Their first full day was spent hiking to viewpoints around the lake, where Sophia captured images of the impossibly blue water. They laughed easily, stealing kisses when no other hikers were around, planning their future between breaths of fresh mountain air. That evening, they cooked dinner together, Nathan grilling steaks while Sophia prepared a salad from local ingredients they'd picked up at a farmer's market on the drive-in. Yet something subtle had shifted in Nathan's behavior since they said their vows. Sophia noticed how he sometimes studied her face with an unfamiliar intensity, how his questions about her past became more specific, more probing. "Tell me again about your college years," he asked as they sat before the fire that evening. "You've never shown me pictures from back then." Sophia carefully navigated these moments, redirecting conversations or offering vague replies that weren't quite lies but never revealed the complete truth. A knot of anxiety began to form in her stomach, a warning signal she tried desperately to ignore. The next morning, Sophia woke early to find Nathan's side of the bed empty. Through the window, she spotted him on the porch, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed tones that disappeared into the mist rising from the surrounding forest. When he returned and she asked casually who he'd been talking to, he smiled too quickly and said, "Just checking in with work. You know how they can't function without me for a week." But his eyes didn't meet hers, and the smile didn't reach them. For the first time since they'd met, Sophia felt the cold touch of fear when she looked at the man she had married. Something had changed, something was wrong, and deep down, she began to suspect that her carefully constructed world was about to shatter like glass beneath a heavy boot. The night of September 16th stretched endlessly for Sophia. She remained awake, sitting by the window, watching rain lash against the glass and listening for the sound of Nathan's car returning. Hours passed with no sign of him. The cabin creaked and groaned under the assault of the storm, mimicking the mounting anxiety in Sophia's chest. She considered calling him but knew he would not answer. Besides, reception in these mountains was spotty at best, especially during storms. Around midnight, the rain finally began to ease. The wind still howled through the trees, but the downpour had slowed to a gentle patter. Sophia moved to the sofa and wrapped herself in a blanket, her eyes fixed on the door. She rehearsed explanations, apologies, and pleas in her mind, hoping to find the perfect words that might make Nathan understand. Deep down, she knew such words probably didn't exist. Some truths, once revealed, changed everything. Nathan returned shortly after 2 a.m. His clothes were soaked, his face haggard. He entered the cabin quietly, almost surprised to find Sophia still awake. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the room. Sophia searched his face for any sign of the man who had looked at her with love just days earlier, but found only a cold, calculating stranger instead. Nathan broke the gaze first, moving past her without a word and heading to the bathroom. The sound of the shower running soon filled the cabin. Sophia remained on the sofa, frozen with fear and uncertainty. When Nathan emerged 30 minutes later, he carried a blanket and pillow to the couch opposite her. He settled himself there, pointedly turning his back to her. The message was clear. Conversation was over for the night. They spent the remaining hours until dawn in silence, neither sleeping, both acutely aware of the other's presence and the vast emotional distance that now separated them. Morning arrived with tentative sunlight breaking through the clouds. Sophia rose first, moving to the kitchen to prepare coffee, a normal routine in what had become a profoundly abnormal situation. Nathan watched her from the sofa, his expression unreadable. When she offered him a mug, he accepted it without thanks, without even looking at her face. Throughout the morning, Nathan made several more phone calls, always stepping outside despite the muddy ground and lingering mist. Sophia caught fragments of these conversations, mentions of Pine Haven, of her name, of someone checking into something. Between calls, Nathan searched for something on his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. Occasionally, he would look up at Sophia with an expression that made her skin crawl, part disgust, part fascination, as if she was some strange specimen under glass. By afternoon, Sophia could bear the tension no longer. She approached Nathan as he returned from another call, asking if they could please talk about what had happened, about what he had discovered. Nathan stared at her for a long moment before telling her that he had been in touch with someone from Seattle, someone who knew about her past. This person had reached out to him just after the wedding through a social media message, revealing Sophia's history and expressing surprise that Nathan didn't know. Sophia felt the floor tilt beneath her. She had been so careful, had cut ties so completely. But the past was never truly gone. It waited, patient as a hunter, for the perfect moment to resurface. She tried to explain to Nathan how difficult her journey had been, how she had only wanted to live authentically without the weight of judgment and prejudice that had followed her for so long. She told him she had fallen in love with him honestly, that her feelings had always been real. Nathan listened without interruption, his face growing harder with each word she spoke. When she finished, he asked her a single question: why she hadn't trusted him enough to tell him before they married. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. He checked the screen, then told her he needed to take it. Once again, he stepped outside, leaving her with her explanation unfinished, her plea for understanding hanging in the air. Through the window, Sophia watched Nathan pacing as he spoke, his free hand gesturing emphatically. This call lasted longer than the others, nearly 20 minutes. When he returned, something had changed. There was a new resolve in his posture, a certainty in his movements that hadn't been there before. He informed Sophia that he would be leaving the cabin. He had arranged to stay with a friend who lived about an hour away, someone he had met during a fishing trip years earlier. He would return the following day to discuss their situation further. Sophia felt panic rising in her throat. Something about Nathan's demeanor, about the calculated way he was handling everything, frightened her more than if he had raged and shouted. She asked if they could work through this together, stay and talk now rather than postponing the inevitable conversation. Nathan refused, stating that he needed space to think clearly. He packed an overnight bag methodically, avoiding her gaze as he moved around the bedroom collecting his things. Before he left, he stood at the door and looked at Sophia one last time. He told her that marriage was built on trust, and she had violated that trust in the most fundamental way possible. The words were delivered without emotion, as if he were reading from a script. Then he was gone, the sound of his car fading as he drove away, leaving Sophia alone with her fear and regret. That evening, Sophia sat on the porch swing, watching darkness settle over the forest. She considered her options. She could leave, return to Pine Haven alone and face whatever awaited her there. She could reach out to friends, though explaining the situation would mean revealing her past to people who had only known her as Sophia. Or she could wait for Nathan to return, hoping against hope that the man she loved was still somewhere inside the cold stranger who had looked at her with such contempt. In the end, Sophia decided to stay. She and Nathan had promised to face life together, for better or worse. This was definitely worse, but she wasn't ready to give up on him, on them, just yet. As night fell completely, she returned inside and locked the door. The cabin that had seemed so romantic just days ago now felt ominous, every creaking board and rustling leaf outside making her start. She checked her phone repeatedly, hoping for a message from Nathan, but the screen remained stubbornly empty. Sleep eluded her for the second night in a row. Instead, she sat by the window again, watching the moon cast silver light across the clearing outside the cabin. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow Nathan would return, and they would find a way forward, together or apart. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that events had already been set in motion that would lead to a conclusion far more terrible than a broken marriage. On the morning of September 18th, the fifth day of what should have been a romantic honeymoon, Sophia woke from a fitful sleep on the sofa. She had finally succumbed to exhaustion in the early hours, her body demanding rest even as her mind raced with worry. Outside, the day dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the emotional storm brewing inside the cabin. She made coffee mechanically, her movements slow with fatigue, and carried her mug to the porch where she sat watching the road, waiting for Nathan's return. Hours passed with no sign of him. By noon, Sophia had called his cell phone 3 times, each call going straight to voicemail. She left messages, her voice growing increasingly anxious with each one, asking when he planned to return, telling him they needed to talk. The lack of response was unsettling. Despite everything, Nathan had always been reliable, prompt, considerate. This silence felt deliberate, punishing. Around 2 in the afternoon, Sophia heard a vehicle approaching. She stood quickly, smoothing her hair and taking a deep breath to steady herself. But it wasn't Nathan's car that pulled into the clearing. It was an unfamiliar black pickup truck. A man Sophia had never seen before emerged from the driver's side, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in jeans and a dark gray hooded sweatshirt despite the warmth of the day. He approached the cabin with purpose, his eyes fixed on Sophia with an intensity that made her step back instinctively. When he reached the bottom of the porch steps, he stopped and asked if she was Sophia Walker. His voice was surprisingly soft for such a large man, but there was an edge to it that heightened her already frayed nerves. Sophia confirmed her identity cautiously, then asked who he was and what he wanted. The man introduced himself as Ryan Mercer, a friend of Nathan's. He explained that Nathan had sent him to check on her and to deliver a message. Nathan would not be returning to the cabin today after all. He needed more time, more space to process everything. Ryan would drive Sophia to a nearby inn where she could stay for the night, giving Nathan the opportunity to return to the cabin alone to gather his thoughts. Something about the story didn't feel right to Sophia. Nathan had friends, certainly, but he had never mentioned anyone named Ryan. And arranging for her to leave the cabin rather than simply calling seemed excessive, even given the circumstances. She asked to speak with Nathan directly, but Ryan claimed Nathan's phone had broken the previous night. Dropped during a walk by the lake, the screen shattered beyond repair. Sophia remained on the porch, one hand gripping the railing as she studied Ryan more carefully. There was something in his demeanor, a barely contained aggression beneath the veneer of helpfulness, that set off warning bells in her mind. She made an excuse about needing to pack her things first, then stepped back into the cabin, closing and locking the door behind her. Through the window, she watched as Ryan's expression darkened. He remained at the bottom of the steps for several minutes, then returned to his truck. Instead of leaving, however, he simply sat in the driver's seat, his eyes fixed on the cabin. Sophia moved away from the window, her heart pounding. She retrieved her phone and tried Nathan's number again. Still no answer. Acting on instinct, Sophia gathered her essential belongings, wallet, keys, phone, jacket, and moved through the cabin to the back door that led into the forest. The original plan had been to wait for Nathan, to try to save what remained of their relationship, but something about Ryan's presence had shifted her priorities entirely. Now, she simply wanted to get away, to find help, to figure out what was really happening. She slipped out the back door quietly, keeping the cabin between herself and the truck where Ryan waited. The forest was dense here, the underbrush thick with ferns and berry bushes. Sophia knew from their earlier hikes that a trail began about 50 yards behind the cabin, eventually leading to a ranger station some 3 miles away. If she could reach it without being seen, she could call for help, perhaps even arrange for a ride back to Pine Haven. Sophia had barely made it to the tree line when she heard the truck door slam. Ryan had spotted her. She abandoned stealth for speed, pushing deeper into the forest as she heard him shout her name. The sound of heavy footsteps on the cabin's back porch spurred her forward, adrenaline overriding her exhaustion. The trail was narrower than she remembered, twisting through the trees in a series of sharp bends. Sophia ran as fast as the terrain allowed, branches whipping against her face and arms, roots threatening to trip her with each step. Behind her, Ryan's voice grew more distant, then closer again as he found the trail and began to pursue her through the wilderness. After what felt like hours but was likely only 15 minutes, Sophia reached a small clearing where the trail forked. She paused, gasping for breath, trying to remember which path led to the ranger station. The sound of Ryan crashing through the underbrush decided for her. She took the left fork, pushing herself to maintain her lead despite the burning in her lungs and legs. The path climbed steadily upward, becoming steeper and rockier. Sophia's pace slowed inevitably as fatigue set in. The voices behind her grew louder again. Then, rounding a bend in the trail, she came face to face with Nathan. He stood in the middle of the path, his expression blank as he took in her disheveled appearance. The scratches on her arms, the leaves in her hair, the fear in her eyes. For a split second, Sophia felt a surge of relief. Whatever had happened between them, Nathan would protect her from the menacing stranger who had come to the cabin. But that relief evaporated as Ryan emerged from the trees behind her, and Nathan nodded at him in acknowledgement. They had planned this together. This was no random encounter on a forest trail. This was a coordinated effort. Nathan hadn't sent Ryan to the cabin. They had worked in tandem, one driving her from the front, the other pursuing from behind, herding her like prey through the woods. Nathan stepped toward her, asking why she had run, why she couldn't simply do as she was told for once. His voice was calm, reasonable even, which somehow made the situation more terrifying. Sophia backed away, looking frantically for an escape route, but Ryan now blocked the path behind her. She was trapped between the two men on the narrow trail, the dense forest on either side offering no easy exit. As Nathan spoke, Ryan circled around, cutting off any possibility of Sophia fleeing back down the trail. The two men exchanged a look that sent ice through Sophia's veins. Whatever Nathan had planned, whatever he had told Ryan, it was becoming increasingly clear that this confrontation in the forest was not meant to end with a simple conversation. Nathan forced Sophia back to the cabin, his grip painfully tight around her wrist. Ryan followed behind them, ensuring she had no opportunity to escape. The forest path that had seemed so romantic during their early hikes now felt like a corridor to her doom. Sophia's mind raced frantically, searching for options, for some way to reason with the man she had married just days ago. Inside the cabin, Nathan shoved her onto the sofa. His face had transformed completely, the warm, gentle eyes that had looked at her with love now cold and distant. Ryan positioned himself by the door, arms crossed over his broad chest, a silent sentinel ensuring she couldn't flee. Nathan began pacing the small living room, his movements tight and controlled. He explained how he had received a message the day after their wedding from someone who knew Sophia from Seattle. This person had expressed surprise at their marriage, eventually revealing the secret Sophia had kept hidden. At first, Nathan hadn't believed it, but he'd spent the past days investigating, contacting people from her past, assembling evidence that confirmed the truth. As he spoke, Sophia noticed his hands trembling despite his measured tone. A dangerous volatility lurked beneath his controlled exterior. She glanced toward Ryan, but found only blank indifference in the larger man's gaze. "You made a fool of me," Nathan said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Everything between us was a lie. Every moment, every touch, every promise." Sophia tried to explain, her voice breaking as she described how she had wanted to tell him but feared his reaction. Feared exactly what was happening now. Her words seemed to bounce off Nathan, as if he couldn't hear her at all. The evening stretched into night, the atmosphere in the cabin growing increasingly tense. Ryan eventually stepped outside to smoke, leaving Sophia alone with Nathan. For a brief moment, she thought she might be able to reach him, to find some remnant of the man who had loved her. She spoke softly about their first date, about the trips they had taken together, about the future they had planned. Nathan listened in silence, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Then, without warning, his control snapped. He lunged forward, hands closing around Sophia's throat. His face contorted with rage as he squeezed, cutting off her air. Sophia clawed desperately at his hands, her lungs burning, spots dancing before her eyes. In those final moments, as consciousness began to fade, Sophia's last thoughts were not of fear or regret, but of profound sadness for the man she had loved. A man whose inability to see beyond her past had transformed him into someone capable of such violence. As darkness closed in, the last thing she saw was Nathan's face above her, tears streaming down his cheeks even as his hands continued their deadly work. When Ryan returned to the cabin 20 minutes later, he found Nathan sitting on the floor beside Sophia's motionless body. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Nathan's ragged breathing. What had begun as a beautiful honeymoon in the mountains had ended in tragedy, a life extinguished by betrayal, fear, and rage. Ryan didn't ask questions. He had known Nathan for years, had served with him in the military before both returned to civilian life. When Nathan had called him 2 days earlier, explaining the situation and asking for help, Ryan had agreed without hesitation. He hadn't expected things to end this way, but he wasn't entirely surprised either. They needed to act quickly. Within hours, someone would notice their extended absence, might come looking for the newlyweds. The cabin needed to be cleared of evidence. Sophia's body needed to be hidden. Nathan needed to disappear. Ryan helped Nathan to his feet, speaking calmly, logically, explaining what they needed to do next. Nathan moved like a man in a trance, following instructions mechanically, his eyes repeatedly drifting back to Sophia's still form on the cabin floor. The proud, confident construction manager was gone, replaced by a hollow shell of a man who had destroyed not just Sophia's life, but his own as well. Outside, the forest stood dark and silent, indifferent to the tragedy that had unfolded within its bounds. The stars shone coldly overhead as Ryan's truck pulled away from the cabin, carrying Nathan toward a future now defined by a single moment of uncontrollable rage. Behind them, the cabin held its terrible secret, waiting for the inevitable discovery that would soon come. On the morning of September 19, 2020, Amelia Donovan, the owner of Crater Lake Cabins, grew concerned when she couldn't reach her guests in Cabin 7. Nathan and Sophia Morgan had been scheduled to check out that day, but numerous calls went unanswered. Their rental car remained parked outside, yet no one responded to knocks. After several failed attempts, Amelia called the local sheriff's office. Deputies Thomas Reeves and Sarah Knott arrived shortly after 11 a.m. When no response came to their announcements, they entered the cabin cautiously, noting the unlocked front door. Inside, the cabin appeared normal at first glance. 2 coffee mugs sat on the kitchen counter. A novel lay open on the sofa. Sophia's camera rested on the dining table. As they moved deeper into the space, they discovered Sophia's body in the bedroom. The medical examiner would later determine she had been dead for approximately 15 hours, strangled with such force that the hyoid bone in her neck had fractured. Her fingernails contained skin fragments, evidence of her desperate struggle. Nathan Morgan was nowhere on the property, and his essential belongings were missing. Within hours, what had begun as a welfare check became a homicide investigation and manhunt. The FBI joined local authorities once it became clear Nathan had likely crossed state lines. Forensic teams processed the cabin meticulously, collecting evidence that would prove crucial in the coming days. Investigators quickly pieced together the timeline. A waitress at a local restaurant recalled serving the couple 2 nights earlier, noting that Nathan had seemed agitated, asking Sophia uncomfortably personal questions. Cell phone records revealed calls from Nathan to Alexander Klein, an old acquaintance of Sophia's from before her transition. When questioned, Alexander admitted that Nathan had contacted him asking about Sophia's past. Not realizing the potential danger, Alexander had confirmed that Sophia was transgender, assuming Nathan already knew. He sounded calm on the phone, Alexander later told detectives, but there was something cold underneath. Security footage from a gas station showed Ryan Mercer's black pickup truck near the cabin on the day of Sophia's death. Ryan, a former military colleague of Nathan's with a record of domestic violence, quickly became a person of interest alongside Nathan. Traffic cameras captured Ryan's truck traveling south toward California, crossing the state line shortly before dawn on September 19. ATM footage showed both men withdrawing cash in Redding, California, later that day. The break in the case came from a bartender named Mia Chen, who recognized Ryan's picture on the news. She reported that 2 men matching their descriptions had stopped in her establishment on the night of September 19. The older man had been visibly distraught, drinking heavily and making concerning statements about something he didn't mean to do. Mia had noted the license plate number, sensing something was wrong. This information allowed authorities to track Ryan's abandoned truck to a parking facility near Sacramento International Airport. Surveillance footage showed both men entering the terminal. Ryan had purchased tickets to Mexico City under his own name, a critical error that enabled authorities to alert Mexican officials. On September 25, Mexican federal police apprehended both men in Mexico City as they attempted to board a bus to a coastal resort town. Neither resisted arrest. By early October, both were back on American soil, facing charges in Oregon. The evidence against them was overwhelming: forensic data, witness testimonies, electronic records, and eventually, Ryan's confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. During questioning, Ryan revealed that Nathan had called him 3 days before the murder, seeking advice after discovering Sophia's past. Ryan admitted he had encouraged Nathan's anger rather than calming him. When Nathan called again the night of the murder, Ryan drove through the night to help his friend escape. "I never thought he'd actually kill her," Ryan told investigators. "I thought he was just leaving her. Not this." Nathan's trial began in February 2021. Throughout the proceedings, he showed no emotion, responding to questions in a monotone voice. When asked why he had killed his wife of only 1 week, Nathan's response chilled the courtroom: "She should have told me the truth." A marriage built on lies isn't a marriage at all. The prosecution presented evidence that the murder wasn't spontaneous but calculated. Nathan had searched online for undetectable ways to kill someone and countries without extradition in the days before Sophia's death. He had withdrawn large sums of cash and contacted Ryan specifically to help plan his escape. The jury found Nathan Morgan guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Ryan Mercer received 15 years for his role in covering up the murder and helping Nathan flee. As 2021 drew to a close, Sophia's story became part of a larger national conversation about violence against transgender individuals. A foundation established in her name provided support to transgender people facing discrimination and threats. Her photography found a wider audience through posthumous exhibitions. At the site where Cabin 7 once stood, now torn down, a small memorial garden grows. A simple stone marker bears Sophia's name, the dates of her birth and death, and the words "Remember her with love." The case left lasting scars on everyone involved. The deputies who discovered Sophia's body both eventually left law enforcement. Amelia Donovan sold her cabin business. Alexander Klein became an advocate for transgender rights, carrying the weight of his unwitting role in the tragedy. And in a maximum security prison, Nathan Morgan spends his days in isolation, both from society and from the reality of what he had done. The man who once planned a future filled with love had destroyed everything in a moment of hatred and betrayal, leaving behind only grief and a story that would serve as both warning and memorial to a life taken too soon.